My name is Jane Carter and I'm 28 years old. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, jarring me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Grandpa Samuel's gravelly voice echoed through my memory as I stared at the ceiling, processing what Mom had just told me through her tears. "He's gone, baby." Grandpa Sam passed peacefully in his sleep. The man who raised me when my parents couldn't, who taught me to tie my shoes and balance a checkbook, who called me his little sunshine every single day, gone. My chest felt like someone had reached in and squeezed my heart until it stopped working properly. But grief wasn't the only emotion coursing through me. There was something else, something darker brewing in my stomach. Because as Mom continued talking, sharing funeral arrangements and family notifications, one name kept coming up repeatedly: Destiny. My half-sister Destiny, who lived 3 states away and visited Grandpa maybe twice a year. Destiny, who rolled her eyes whenever he told his old war stories. Destiny, who was already making demands about the funeral arrangements before his body was even cold. "She wants to handle everything," Mom whispered, her voice cracking. "Says she knows what Grandpa would have wanted." I sat up in bed, my hands clenching the sheets. Something felt terribly wrong. Grandpa Sam had been my world, my anchor, my everything. We talked every Sunday without fail, shared inside jokes and planned fishing trips that never seemed long enough. And now Destiny was swooping in like she owned the place. The foundation of everything I thought I knew was starting to crack. The funeral parlor smelled like lilies and old carpet, a combination that made my stomach churn as I watched Destiny command the room like she owned it. She stood near Grandpa's casket in a designer black dress that probably cost more than my rent, directing the funeral director with the authority of someone who'd been planning this for years. "The flowers need to be rearranged," she announced, her manicured nails clicking against her phone case. "And I specifically requested the premium service package. Grandpa Samuel deserves only the best." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. Where was this devotion when he was alive and asking her to visit for Christmas? Where was this concern when he was in the hospital last year and she couldn't be bothered to drive down? "Excuse me," I approached the funeral director. "I'm Jane, his granddaughter. I was hoping to have a moment to." "Oh, you're the other granddaughter," he smiled politely. "Miss Destiny has been handling all the arrangements. She mentioned you might want to be involved." The other granddaughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to find Destiny watching me with a smug smile, her arms crossed over her chest. "Don't worry, Jane," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I've got everything under control. You know how overwhelmed you get with important decisions." My face burned. "I'm not overwhelmed. I just think." "That's exactly what I mean." She turned back to the funeral director. "Family dynamics can be so complicated. Grandpa always said I had the better head for these things." The lie slid off her tongue so easily, so naturally, that for a moment I doubted my own memories. But then I remembered Grandpa's voice from our last conversation. "Destiny's got her own life, sunshine. But you're my heart walking around outside my body." Something was very, very wrong here. The funeral was beautiful, everything Grandpa would have wanted, though it killed me to admit Destiny had done well. But as we gathered at Mom's house afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching a performance rather than experiencing genuine grief. Destiny held court in the living room, accepting condolences like she was the official family spokesperson. She talked about all the special moments she'd shared with Grandpa, painting herself as his confidant and closest companion. "He always said I reminded him of Grandma Rose," she told Mrs. Hughes from next door. "Same spirit, same business sense. He was so proud of my marketing degree." I excused myself to the kitchen, needing air that wasn't thick with her lies. That's where I found Uncle Mateo, Grandpa's younger brother, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee and a troubled expression. "You all right, baby girl?" he asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "Just processing everything," I managed, but Mateo saw right through me. He always could. He glanced toward the living room, then back at me. "Your grandfather loved you something fierce, you know that, right?" "I know." The words came out shakier than I intended. Mateo was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee with unnecessary focus. Finally, he looked up. "There's gonna be a will reading next week. Your granddaddy was very specific about who needed to be there." Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. "Specific how?" "Just be there, Jane. And don't let nobody tell you you don't belong." His eyes met mine and I saw something I couldn't quite identify. A warning maybe. Or a promise. From the living room, Destiny's laughter rang out like breaking glass. Oh, Grandpa always said the money should go to someone who could handle it responsibly. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Money. The law office of Morrison, Clark and Associates felt intimidating with its dark wood paneling and leather-bound books that probably hadn't been opened since the Clinton administration. I sat in an uncomfortable chair, my palms sweating as I watched Destiny flip through her phone like she was at a coffee shop instead of her grandfather's will reading. "This is taking forever," she muttered, glancing at her Rolex. "I have a spa appointment at 3. Mr. Morrison, a thin man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "We're just waiting for one more person." "Who?" Destiny snapped. "Everyone who matters is here." I looked around the room. Mom sat beside me, clutching my hand like a lifeline. Uncle Mateo was there along with Aunt Linda and a few family friends. But Destiny was right. I couldn't think of who else would be coming. The door opened and my heart nearly stopped. A woman walked in, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and clothes that screamed old money. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Mrs. Caldwell." Mr. Morrison stood, his demeanor suddenly much more respectful. "Thank you for coming." Mrs. Caldwell. I knew that name. Grandpa had mentioned her a few times, but always in passing. Something about his army days, I thought, but the details were fuzzy. Destiny's confident posture faltered slightly as Mrs. Caldwell took a seat directly across from us. The older woman's sharp blue eyes swept the room, lingering on each of our faces before settling on something in her purse. "Now that we're all here," Mr. Morrison began, pulling out a thick document, "we can proceed with the reading of Samuel Carter's last will and testament." My hands started trembling. I don't know why, but something about Mrs. Caldwell's presence had shifted the entire energy in the room. Destiny might not have noticed, but I could feel it. This wasn't going to go the way anyone expected. Mr. Morrison's voice filled the room as he began reading Grandpa's will, starting with the standard legal language that made my head spin. But then he got to the meat of it and my world started tilting off its axis. "To my beloved granddaughter Jane Carter, who has been the light of my life and the daughter of my heart, I leave my personal effects, including my military medals, my watch collection, and all photographs and memorabilia." My throat tightened. Even in death, Grandpa was taking care of me, making sure I had the things that mattered most, our memories. Destiny shifted impatiently. "What about the real estate? The investments?" Mr. Morrison continued reading without acknowledging her interruption. "My house and all furnishings therein go to my granddaughter Jane Carter, along with my 1967 Mustang and the contents of my workshop." "What?" Destiny's voice cracked like a whip. "That's impossible. Grandpa promised me the house. I'm his real granddaughter." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Real granddaughter. As if somehow my 28 years of loving him, of Sunday phone calls and bedtime stories and fishing trips, meant nothing because we didn't share DNA. Mom's hand squeezed mine tighter. "Destiny, that's enough." "No, it's not enough." She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous. Jane isn't even really family. I'm his actual blood relative. His biological granddaughter. The money should go to me." Mrs. Caldwell made a soft sound, almost like a chuckle, but when I looked at her, her expression was unreadable. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat. "If I may continue, there is the matter of Mr. Carter, investment portfolio and business holdings, valued at approximately $85 million. The number hit the room like a physical force. $85 million. I'd known Grandpa was comfortable, but I'd never imagined. Destiny's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Now we're talking. Finally, some sense." But Mr. Morrison wasn't finished reading, and something told me the biggest shock was yet to come. The entirety of Samuel Carter's financial portfolio, including stocks, bonds, business interests, and liquid assets totaling approximately $85 million. Mr. Morrison paused, his eyes finding mine across the room, "goes to his granddaughter, Jane Carter." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was falling through space, my brain unable to process what I'd just heard. $85 million. To me. Destiny's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, rage, and then something darker. "That's impossible," she whispered, then louder. That's impossible. I'm his real granddaughter. I'm his blood. She spun toward me, her perfectly applied makeup starting to smudge around her eyes. You manipulated him. You turned a sick old man against his own family. Destiny, stop it, Mom said firmly, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Mrs. Caldwell finally spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Blood doesn't make family, young lady. Love does. And Samuel Carter loved that girl like she was his own flesh and blood from the moment she came into his life. Who are you to say anything? Destiny whirled on her. You're not even family. Mrs. Caldwell's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Oh, but I am family. I'm your grandmother, Destiny. Your father's mother. The room went dead silent. My brain stuttered trying to process this information. Mrs. Caldwell was Destiny's paternal grandmother? The grandmother who'd supposedly died when Destiny was young? That's impossible, Destiny breathed. You're dead. Dad said you were dead. Your father says a lot of things, Mrs. Caldwell replied coolly. Most of them lies. Just like he lied about Samuel being his father. The floor dropped out from under everyone in that room. I watched Destiny's face drain of all color as the implications hit her. She wasn't Grandpa Sam's granddaughter at all. Destiny collapsed into her chair like someone had cut her strings. What are you talking about? She whispered, but I could see in her eyes that some part of her had always known. Mrs. Caldwell opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. Your father Antonio is my son. But Samuel Carter is not his father, which means Samuel was never your grandfather. She handed the envelope to Mr. Morrison, who examined the contents with professional detachment. DNA tests, birth certificates, hospital records. All dated from 35 years ago. My mom made a sound like she'd been punched. Oh my God. Karen knew. Karen had to know. Karen, Destiny's mother, my father's ex-wife. The woman who'd torn our family apart and then disappeared with Dad, only to surface years later with a daughter she claimed was Grandpa Sam's granddaughter. She knew, Mrs. Caldwell confirmed. They both knew. But Samuel Carter was a wealthy man even then, and they saw an opportunity. They convinced him that Antonio was his son from a brief relationship decades ago. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Dad's sudden departure from our family. The mysterious appearance of Antonio and Karen. Grandpa's confusion about dates and details that never quite added up. But Grandpa accepted it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He welcomed them. He loved Destiny. Because that's the kind of man he was, Mrs. Caldwell said gently. He had room in his heart for everyone. But as the years went on and Antonio kept asking for money, and Destiny rarely visited unless she needed something, Samuel started to have doubts. Destiny's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. No. This isn't happening. Grandpa loved me. He said I was his golden girl. He tried to love you, Mrs. Caldwell said, and for the first time her voice held a note of sympathy. But love isn't just biology, sweetheart. It's showing up. It's caring. It's being present. The weight of 28 years of lies was crushing down on all of us, but especially on Destiny, who'd built her entire identity around being the real granddaughter. And now she was nobody at all. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat, drawing our attention back to the documents. There's more, I'm afraid. Mr. Carter left specific instructions for me to share additional information if this situation arose. He pulled out a letter handwritten in Grandpa's familiar scrawl. My heart clenched seeing his careful cursive one more time. This is to be read only if questions arise about family relationships, Mr. Morrison began. Samuel Carter writes, I've known the truth about Antonio for the past 5 years. A private investigator confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. But I couldn't bring myself to destroy Destiny's world over her parents' lies. Destiny made a choking sound, her hand pressed to her throat. However, Mr. Morrison continued, I will not let their deception rob my real granddaughter of her inheritance. Jane has been my family from the moment she called me Grandpa at age 3. She is the child of my heart, and she deserves everything I can give her. Tears were streaming down my face now. Even knowing the truth, even facing the lies, Grandpa had protected me. Had protected all of us in his way. To Destiny I say this. You are not responsible for your parents' choices. You are a smart, capable young woman who can make her own way in the world. Use this knowledge to build something honest and true." Destiny was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. All her arrogance, all her superiority had crumbled in the span of 30 minutes. Mrs. Caldwell stood up and walked over to her, placing a surprisingly gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're still my granddaughter, child. That part is real. And if you want to know your real family, if you want to learn about your actual heritage, I'm here." But Destiny shrugged away from her touch, stumbling to her feet. "I need to go. I can't be here." She rushed toward the door, then turned back one last time, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. "This isn't over, Jane. My father will contest this. We'll fight it." The door slammed behind her, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. The week following the will reading passed in a blur of phone calls, legal documents, and emotional conversations that left me drained. True to her word, Destiny and her father Antonio were threatening to contest the will, claiming Grandpa had been manipulated or wasn't of sound mind. I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at bank statements that still didn't feel real. $85 million. The number kept appearing on papers and computer screens, but my brain refused to accept it as reality. My phone rang for the 100th time that day. Another reporter who'd somehow gotten wind of the story. Carter family fortune scandal was apparently trending on social media, complete with wild speculation about gold digging and family feuds. I turned the phone off and buried my face in my hands. This wasn't what Grandpa would have wanted. All this fighting, all this publicity, all this pain. A soft knock at my door made me look up. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Caldwell holding a grocery bag and wearing a patient smile. "I brought soup," she said when I opened the door. "And some perspective if you're interested." We sat at my small kitchen table, eating homemade chicken soup that tasted like it came straight from someone's grandmother's kitchen. Which I supposed it had. "How are you holding up, dear?" she asked, her sharp blue eyes studying my face. "I don't know," I admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is all a mistake. That I'm not supposed to have all this money. That I don't deserve it. Samuel thought you deserved it. That should be enough." "But Destiny." I trailed off, remembering the look of devastation on her face. "Destiny is learning a hard lesson about the difference between entitlement and inheritance," Mrs. Caldwell said firmly. "She's not a bad person, but she's been raised to believe the world owed her something simply because she existed. Sometimes that kind of wake-up call is exactly what someone needs. What if they contest the will and win?" Mrs. Caldwell smiled. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Samuel was very thorough, dear. Very thorough indeed." Antonio Carter burst into the lawyer's office 3 days later like a man possessed, Destiny trailing behind him with puffy eyes and a defeated expression that was a far cry from her usual confidence. I'd been meeting with Mr. Morrison about establishing financial accounts when they arrived demanding an emergency meeting. "This is fraud," Antonio shouted, his face red with indignation. That old man was senile, confused. He didn't know what he was doing. "Mr. Carter," Mr. Morrison said calmly, "your father underwent comprehensive psychological evaluation just 6 months ago as part of his estate planning. I have the documentation right here. He was declared completely competent." Antonio's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "Well, then she manipulated him." He pointed an accusing finger at me. "She isolated him from his real family, turned him against his own blood." "Actually," Mrs. Caldwell spoke from the corner where she'd been sitting quietly, "let's talk about blood, shall we, Antonio?" She stood up and walked to Mr. Morrison's desk, pulling out a thick folder. "DNA tests don't lie, son. Neither do birth certificates. Samuel Carter was never your father, which means you've been committing fraud for over 30 years. Antonio's face went from red to white in seconds. "You can't prove that. Hospital records from St. Mary's, dated 9 months before your birth. Samuel was deployed overseas with the 82nd Airborne. Medical records show he was treated for a broken leg in Germany the entire month he would have been conceived." She slid the documents across the desk. "Your real father was Thomas Caldwell, my late husband. The man you told everyone was dead." Destiny looked up for the first time since entering the room. "Dad? Is this true?" Antonio's silence was answer enough. The lies that had shaped their entire family dynamic were crumbling around them, and I almost felt sorry for Destiny. Almost. So not only have you been lying about Samuel being your father, Mrs. Caldwell continued, you've been collecting money from him under false pretenses for decades. That's called fraud, Antonio. And it carries serious legal consequences. Antonio grabbed Destiny's arm. We're leaving. This isn't over. But as they headed for the door, Destiny pulled away from his grasp and turned back to face me. I'm sorry, she whispered so quietly I almost missed it. I'm sorry for all of it. Then she was gone, leaving behind only the echo of her apology. 2 weeks later, I stood in Grandpa's house. My house now, surrounded by decades of memories and the lingering scent of his aftershave. Every room told a story of the man who'd raised me, loved me, and ultimately given me more than I ever could have imagined. The legal challenges had evaporated overnight once Mrs. Caldwell presented her evidence to Antonio's lawyer. Faced with potential fraud charges and criminal prosecution, Antonio had withdrawn all claims and disappeared with his tail between his legs. Destiny, however, had surprised everyone by reaching out through her grandmother. She wanted to meet, to talk, to try to make sense of the wreckage of her life. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, both of us looking like we'd aged years in the past month. She was different, smaller somehow, without the armor of arrogance and entitlement she'd always worn. I don't know who I am anymore, she said, stirring her latte with mechanical precision. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, about my place in the world, it was all a lie. You're still you, I said gently. You still have your education, your career, your talents. Those things are real. She laughed bitterly. Built on a foundation of fraud. Do you know how many times I bragged about being Samuel Carter, granddaughter? How many doors that opened for me? How many people I looked down on because I thought I was better than them? I remembered her words at the funeral parlor, the other granddaughter, and felt a stab of vindication that I immediately felt guilty about. You can't change the past, I said. But you can decide what happens next. Destiny looked up at me then, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. I want to make it right. I don't know how, but I want to try. Grandpa, he was a good man. He didn't deserve what my father did to him. No, I agreed. He didn't. We sat in silence for a while, two women trying to figure out how to move forward from the ruins of everything we'd thought we knew about family and love and belonging. 6 months later, I stood in the main hall of the Samuel Carter Community Center, watching children from the neighborhood play basketball on the court that had been installed where Grandpa's old workshop used to be. The house had been too big for me alone, too full of memories that needed to be shared rather than hoarded. So I'd done what I thought Grandpa would have wanted. I'd turned it into something that could help other people, other families, other kids who needed a safe place to go and someone to believe in them. It's beautiful, Destiny said, appearing at my elbow. She'd been volunteering here for the past 3 months, working with teenagers on college prep and life skills. The work seemed to be healing something in her, giving her a purpose that wasn't built on lies or entitlement. He would have loved this, I said, watching a group of kids who reminded me of myself at that age. Uncertain, looking for belonging, needing someone to see their potential. You know what the best part is? Destiny asked. What's that? You didn't have to do this. You could have kept the money, lived like a queen, never thought about anyone else again. But you chose to honor him by helping people. That's what real family does. I looked at her, this woman who'd been my adversary and was slowly becoming something like a friend. We all have choices to make about who we want to be. Speaking of which, she said, pulling an envelope from her purse, I have something for you. Inside was a check for $50,000. Every penny Antonio had taken from Grandpa over the years, money Destiny had earned back through her marketing business. I can't take this, I started to say, but she held up her hand. It's not for you. It's for the center. For the kids. It's my way of saying thank you to Samuel Carter for being the grandfather I was too selfish to appreciate when I had the chance. I folded the check carefully and slipped it into my pocket. He would have been proud of you. I hope so, she said quietly. I really hope so. 1 year after Grandpa's death, I found myself back in his old study, now converted into an office for the community center. The walls were lined with pictures of him and me throughout the years. Fishing trips, birthday parties, graduation ceremonies, quiet Sunday afternoons when it was just us and the newspaper. Mrs. Caldwell knocked on the door frame, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the gentle smile that had become so familiar over the past months. "How are you feeling, dear?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Grateful," I said and meant it. Overwhelmed sometimes, but grateful. The money had changed my life in ways I never could have imagined, but not in the ways people might expect. Yes, I lived more comfortably now. Yes, I'd been able to quit my old job and focus on running the center full-time. But the real change was deeper than that. I understood now what Grandpa had been trying to teach me all those years. Family isn't about blood or biology or who has claims to what. It's about showing up. It's about love in action. It's about choosing each other day after day, even when it's hard. "He knew, Mrs. Caldwell said, following my gaze to a picture of Grandpa teaching me to change a tire when I was 16. "He knew exactly what kind of person you'd become with or without his money. The inheritance was never about the money, Jane. It was about trust. Trust. Trust that you'd use what he gave you to make the world a little bit better. Trust that you'd honor his memory not by hoarding his wealth, but by sharing his values." She smiled. "Trust that you'd understand the difference between having money and being rich." Through the window, I could see Destiny leading a group of teenagers in a college prep workshop. Her voice animated as she talked about scholarship applications and essay writing. She came here every weekend now, sometimes staying late to help individual kids with their homework or just to listen when they needed someone to talk to. We'd both learned something important in that lawyer's office a year ago. Destiny had learned that being handed things doesn't make you worthy of them. And I'd learned that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money at all. It's the knowledge that someone believed in you enough to trust you with their legacy. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered, touching the framed photo on my desk. "Thank you for showing me what real family looks like." Outside, the sound of children's laughter filled the air, and I knew he was smiling too. The million-dollar question. If you were in Jane's shoes, would you have walked away too or found a way to forgive? I want to hear about your own experiences in the comments below. And if these stories of people choosing themselves hit different, subscribe for more content that'll have you questioning everything.